All right, without dragging you through the whole process again, I'm establishing the perimeter of this door just the way I did on the other side. And this one went a little bit easier because I do have some of the patterns from the other side. While they weren't exactly right, I was able to refine them, and they worked out okay and sped up the process a bit. So I started with this piece, which gives me the profile of the door, and then this piece over here that the door skin will actually get folded around this step over here, and this is to create the door gap here. So on the other side I had a little trouble. I didn't make this gap wide enough when I started, and I had to go back and re-step it. So I tried to make sure that I got a big enough gap this time so that when the metal folds around, the final gap is about 3/16 of an inch is what I'm looking for on the gap. So I got about a 5/16 gap right now between this piece and this piece, and it's also set back the thickness of the metal that will overlay it as a skin. This little prop right here, excuse me, that's for the door, but opening the door latch. But this is just the same as on the other side. This piece sticks out so far, then it's even though it's a pretty stiff metal, it has a tendency to want to rotate in and out, which you can't maintain any of your gaps if this thing is flipping and flopping. So this is just a piece of 3/8 tubing. Just welded here just to keep this from rotating. The front side, again, we have a similar situation where I had to first add this profile coming down off of this existing profile, and then following out the curve of this quarter panel over there, and just projecting it forward here. And then finally this piece here, which gives us this profile that will dictate how it meets the fender. Anyway, like I said, this is just something that I've gone through on another video, but that's where I'm moving to now, and it's taking a little bit less time. I've already flattened out my sample piece, which is just a 020, I think it's 021, this metal, so it's real thin, so it's real easy to make a pattern. So I can overlay that piece that's over there that's rolled up already, and hopefully this will go a little bit smoother as far as trying to get these reverse bends in. And this part here, that was a real issue on the last one. I had to come up with a real crazy rig to do that, and I wasn't real happy with the final result. I have to play around with a few things to try and get that a little bit better for this side. But that's where it sits right now, and I was in the wheel hole a little bit this morning, finishing up a little this and a little that, painting it, getting it ready for some seam sealer in there. But that's pretty much done. Also, there's a little curiosity I did the other day. I don't know if I can throw this up here with just one hand or not. It's pretty heavy. But I was staring at this thing so long, and I'm like wondering, as you know, these quarter panels are about, well, they're 2 inches taller than a 71 would be, because I had to spread them out because of some details that had to be changed, and the overall height difference in the car and the sides. So I was worried about how tall this rear panel was going to be, what it was going to look like. So I took the door skin that I cut off of this car, the Challenger door skin, and I just bent up a piece. I just laid it on there like that just to get an idea. And I don't think it's too bad. I mean, it is quite a bit taller than the old car. You can see that, but you know, I think it'll be fine. It doesn't look too odd. But anyway, right now it doesn't have the counterbalance of having a lower panel in here, so this looks even a little bit bigger than it normally would look. But like I said, depending on the angle, of course, this lens on this camera distorts things, so it's kind of hard to see. But anyway, that's not as alarmingly bad as I thought it was going to look, so we'll see how that goes. Moving right along. So, being familiar with working with lighter gauge sheet metals day in and day out, I made some assumptions when I tried to make the right side skin of this car that you can't really make with some heavier gauge metals. This is an 045 metal, and it's, even though it's AK, which is a softer compound, it's easily worked, it's very difficult with the thickness to hand manipulate this, especially a large piece like this as far as the weight is concerned. This is the sample piece, and this is, I think, 023. Very easily manipulated. It takes the contours of the bulkheads on either side, and anything on the bottom here that needed adjusting was easily hand manipulated. It's a little rougher over here, so I've had to employ some different strategies. I was, of course, rolling it over this roller, but it got to the point where it really wasn't affecting it that much. So I've had to, I put in a smaller bar that I could lean on, and of course, it created some kinks and some flat spots, and it took me forever to continuously reverse the panel, take some of the kink out, turn it back upside down. Also, what I've had to do is I've taken the profile, and because it's a compound profile that comes across the top, then it reverses for a little while here below the body line, and then rounds over again with a very tight radius. I broke it into two segments. First, to try to get the shape of the top. Just concentrate on getting this. Several difficult things are, of course, when you get to the top edge over here of the door. This is actually the top of the panel. I've got it turned around right now, but trying to get this last little bit to be all even as far as how it rolls into the top, without it wants to just bow out in this direction here. You can see I've got a little bit of a high spot here. I've dollied it out, but I was manipulating that down over the tighter radius. I have these things hanging around for about probably 40 years. I inherited them at a shop that I had back home in New Jersey. They're used for, doing copper standing roofs. They're kind of a handheld, gigantic plier that you could use. Antiques, but hey, it worked pretty good. To grab a hold of that edge and try to kind of work it down over to get that to lay flat so it didn't have an arc in it. But I've had to rig up a little, there's a little ledge under here I rigged up temporarily so that I can roll the panel up underneath here, and, reverse it, turn it upside down, and that way I have something to bear against, and so I can use the weight of the leverage of the panel itself to try and bring some more form and more shape into the panel. Definitely a learning experience. I've had to, like I said, break the patterns into two shapes. This is the lower shape. As you can see, it has a little return, but what I have to do first is this is the body line down to the bottom of the skin, and I'm using this right now to try and guide me as to making sure I have this sharp curve in the bottom of the panel. That's just a little hard to achieve. If you're doing this with a slip roller, it's really hard to achieve because you have to hit it right on target. And one person has to roll the sheet metal through the slip roller while the other one tightens the adjustments up as you're rolling it in order to tighten the radius up at the very end. I mean, it's pretty tricky. I imagine there's all kinds of techniques for achieving it, but when you've got two radiuses, one kind of flattish and the other one starts out flat and then tightens up really quickly, it's a bit difficult to achieve. I thought perhaps if I just put the general arc in it, that it would be easier to just hand manipulate that last little bit in, but it's proven to be a challenge. Even though the metal on this car mics out at 045, which I find it hard to believe for a brand new car, I think it would have been wiser just to go with 035, especially with the standalone panels like this. This doesn't relate to this in any way. You want to keep the thickness the same when you're welding panels and putting extensions in and pieces like that. But this panel and the hood and what I have to do to these independent panels here, it doesn't require it to be the same thickness. And I think I'm probably going to switch over when I get to the hood, because this stuff here is really, it's fighting me, and I really don't have the tooling to deal with metal quite this thick. Well, we're pretty close here to matching this profile. My final move was to make this little reverse curve in here, which was a little too aggressive on the last panel. So I took it a lot, made it a little bit shallower this time, just to give me some room to play with. This is where the door actually stops. So when this material is cut off, you can see it's right now it's holding this from rotating the rest of the way in around the profile. But that's not rigid, so that'll also move a little bit. Once I tuck that in, that should be a pretty decent, a whole lot better than the last one. That's all I have to say about that. But let me just show you something that we've done at work for a number of years, of putting a curve at the bottom of a panel. I used to have curved rockers on the cars at the bottom, so we had to come up with a device to do that. And well, this one is a little bit too big. The sheet metal brake will move back roughly about an inch. So an inch diameter pipe is really all you should be using here, because this one's 1 3/8 inches, and it's out. It's basically it's out a little too far. But it worked for my purposes, because I just needed to just get a little bit of a reverse roll in that panel. But what this is just a piece of tubing with a flat strip of metal welded onto it, so that it sits flat underneath the jaw of the brake. And then you have to adjust the brake, of course, to where the jaw is as far back as the dimension of the pipe you're using, which, as you can see, this is a little bit too big, but like I said, it worked out for me. The thing you have to do is move this jaw back in that direction to its maximum. Then you have to adjust the clamps on the ends here, which is this adjustment right here. Loosen this nut up so that it'll accommodate both the flange that you've welded to that piece of pipe, and then the stock that you're going to be using, that you need to put the roll in, so that when it tightens down, you don't over tighten these ends of the sheet metal brake. So these are set right now to clamp everything up nicely. Of course, with this thing being independent, excuse me, I have to make sure that that's in all the way up against that jaw. It wants to scoot out. So I've got my stock in place, and I've made whatever calculations are to the middle of the radius here and what I want to end up with. And also, it's nice to have this piece of angle iron back on the brake. It gives a little more surface area to just take a long panel up without it getting a little bit goofy. So then once you get that situation, it rolls up. It'll start to roll up around that piece of tubing pretty nicely. And you end up with a pretty decent radius. Now, if this was this dimension here, which is about 1 inch, then it would have been, you'd be able to make a 90-degree bend here with a very nice looking bend on the bottom of this panel here with a 1-inch radius. Anyway, I just thought I would show you that little trick there that we use at the shop for making radiuses at the bottom of panels. And you can certainly get smaller than this. You can put 3/8 or 1/2 inch or whatever you need, and then bring the jaw out to where the edge of this pipe is right where the split in the brake is. And when you roll it up, it'll just pull it right up around that piece of tubing, and you get a nice clean round edge. Well, there's a lot more to do, obviously, but I'm a whole lot happier with the way this one ended up going on just the first time. It laid down really, really good. It's about 85 to 90% of the profile that's supposed to be there, and that's a whole lot better than the last one, where I had to come up with that crazy monkey contraption to try and save the panel. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with this, and like they say, all it lacks is finishing. So we'll move on from here.